but is that why Apple's getting into the car?
I think they just saw I think Tesla sort of proves that because car companies before Tesla were not great businesses. It's not like people were rushing to put more money into car companies because basically it was a low margin thing and it's very expensive to fold and bend steel. The majority of a car is steel that's folded, bent, and welded together.
Yeah.
That's a low margin, expensive business that takes a lot of capital to get it to the point where it's efficient.
Yeah.
I think what sort of Tesla showed is that one, people are willing to spend more for something that's better, and there was a lot of design disruption. There was a lot of low-hanging design fruit that car companies had just neglected off of just tradition and doing things their own ways. I remember I was on like a panel with, I think it was like the head of design from Ford, and this was a while back when Tesla was just getting started, and people were asking him about electric. He's like, I just don't think electric cars are real cars. And he was so blinded by his own expertise. And he wasn't wrong. He's a very knowledgeable person about car design, but he wasn't really watching where the future was going.
Yeah.
And that's why Tesla very quickly had a stock price that was worth like the next 10 auto companies combined.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Apple saw as that sort of stock price and that ability to create
You don't think that they see valuable screen time within your car now?
It's another point to collect sort of data and build also affinity with the other platforms.
But also think about it. As we move towards self-driving, all of a sudden you will have unbothered screen time in your car.
Right.
Do you want that to be on a Tesla screen or do you want that to be on an Apple screen?
That's the really interesting thing, right? So
that's what I thought it was, combined with one other thing, and I'm curious about your take on this. Apple are, let's say they're the masters of battery life. The biggest inhibitor to electric car use from the average consumer outside of price is battery life. Well, I can't go visit my grandparents. They're 5 hours away. I got to stop 2 times on the way. If they're the best at battery life and they can solve that problem, plus they get to be part of this extra screen as we go into the era of driverless cars or self-driving cars, don't they want to be?
Yeah. And it's also a thing like where if you own a Apple laptop, you're more likely to get an iPhone because same type of interface, compatibility.
Yes.
And so if you have an Apple laptop that is the majority of your work, the rest of your work is done through your iPhone, and then getting an Apple car that extends that sort of office to your commute kind of makes sense, right? It's like all the same messaging. You're going with seamlessly with your conversation through them all.
Yep.
It kind of makes sense. I mean, I would probably get an Apple car if they made one. I'm not like a huge car guy. I kind of look at them as like what's functional transportation. So if it was more seamless with the things I use a lot of, I would get it.
But you don't drive to work every day for a half an hour.
No.
I don't drive to work every day for a half an hour, but I'll either Uber or I would take the subway back home.
Yeah.
That's phone time for me.
Yeah.
Apple has my screen time.
Yeah.
Now that the commute is going to be phone time, they have to.
Yeah.
For the good of their business. I look at this no different than like the Fuji Nokia thing. Have you heard about that story? When Fuji bought the 92 Olympics or something?
Mm-mm.
They bought the rights for like the 92 Olympics. And that was what shrunk the moat enough for like Fuji to become equal standing to Nokia. This is back when the film cameras, when I'm speaking to the millennials right now, they have no fucking clue what I'm talking about. But in other words, there are like certain moments in history where you let someone approach your market share without even seeing it. You don't recognize that now that's your biggest competitor. And I think that Apple's super smart to get in there, because if we're going to spend significant time in our cars and then we get super comfortable with this Tesla screen, if Tesla comes out with a phone, we're like, well, shit, I want my phone to be like my car screen. Right. I'm in my car for an hour a day. Some people are driving an hour a day. Matter of fact, how many more people would be willing to drive if, one, they don't even have to find parking. They could send the car home. Eventually, you'll just be able to send the car home, right? There won't be any parking. Drive me to work, send it home, come pick me up when I'm ready.
Yeah. I tend to think that that's farther away. So this is how I look at like the self-driving car thing, is walk down a street of sort of like a mixed income neighborhood and look at all the cars and find the car that's the oldest and like what is the average age of those cars.
Okay.
So even once we get to the point where there are new, fully capable self-driving cars, it'll be a ways beyond that point where we see full adoption of them. Meaning that if we walk down the street of like the Airbnb you're staying at in Florida, we'll see cars that might be 15 years old, right? We'll see some early 2000s models like pickup trucks and stuff like that mixed in with some brand new cars. So it's going to be a ways before there's actually fully saturated amount of these brand new self-driving cars. So if you look at this example of your street, even once we have the car available, we'll still be seeing for the next 15 years cars that don't have that availability.
I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback. Every time you see a huge technological jump, I feel like it expedites that transition. So, for example, the flip phone to the smartphone.
Right.
You could not be seen with a fucking flip phone when everybody had a smartphone. It didn't have to be an Apple phone. Maybe it was an Android. Maybe it was a BlackBerry or something like that. But you need to have a fucking smartphone. And I feel like if we go self-driving or if we go electric, whatever that transition is, once it becomes ubiquitous, if you had a 15-year-old car, you're going to find the cheapest fucking electric car and get on board.
What's the longest you've owned a phone, though, for?
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
The obsolescence of a phone is a much higher thing. I think the concept is true, but I think the turnover rate of cars is slower than phones.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm probably on a new phone like every 8 months because I drop them and break them or
no, that's a great point. The turnover on phone. Yeah, I'm super curious. I'm super curious about it, man.
It's interesting when you look back in time and looked at how we predicted so incorrectly where we'd be technologically wise. So one of my favorite things to do is to look at old articles on the future of fashion, and they're asking people that are experts in fashion and these kind of trends and textiles and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And whenever they you look at like the 1960s, what will people be wearing in like the 2000s? And it was all like spandex, Star Trek.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're still wearing denim. Like we still wear jeans. And that's what I'm really curious about.
We do wear spandex.
Well,
we wear all of it.
Well, here's what happens, right? Jeans, denim makes no sense as a fabric in today's thing. We can make such high-tech, space-age fabrics that like wick away moisture, that cool, that have plenty of like like we can do all this sort of innovative stuff with fabrics. But still, jeans are the most dominant pant.
Yeah.
But what's happened is, it's not that we've replaced denim, this antiquated material. We just slowly infect it with 10% spandex, 5% lycra. We make it a little stretchier. We got stretchy jeans, a little more room. And then that's the way I think technology really happens. It's not quite as completely tabula rasa, clear the decks, total revolution. It's this little infection, and then that changes this other ripple.
Yeah.
So I look at it in like furniture, woodworking, and design. So for so long, it used to be that the signature of a talented woodworker was if you could make a board flat. If you could make a board flat with like an axe and like something that looks like a shovel but sharper, you were really fucking good at what you do.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we create machines that can do that effortlessly. And the woodworker's just like, fuck. And then what happens? You know what happens? Flat boards become everywhere. And then you know what like sort of interior designers go? I don't want flat boards. I want those old-fashioned like hand chisel things. And then we have to invent fucking machines to make that look like they're fucking beaver chewed up wood.
You're describing jeans.
Right. And so even as we technologically progress, we go, well, I don't know if I like this new technology. I mean, like joggers are more comfortable.
Yeah.
Like it makes sense to always wear like stylish looking sweatpants.
Yeah.
Thank God that we've created a more forgiving aesthetic that allows us to wear these in public. But at the same time, you're kind of like, this looks a little too space age. I gotta pull back and look a little more classic.
Culture is undefeated, man. It's like we've been wearing the same suits. We've changed the material a little bit. We've been wearing the same suit for the last 200, 300 years, probably. Yeah. When did the suit get invented? 200 years ago?
After powdered wigs died down. We can only have really one stiff, uncomfortable thing at a time.
Yeah. So it's like the fact that, like, I mean, I bet you look into Japanese culture where they're still wearing, some of the same outfits today, but they've shifted the fabrics.
Yeah.
The wooden clogs. They're similar, but maybe it's a little bit more lightweight wood.
Yeah.
Maybe they're a little bit more comfortable. There's certain things they're going to do to make shit a little bit better, a little bit more easy for us to get along with today.
It's really interesting what sort of design trends stick around.
Bro. That's American fucking pants.
Here's my sort of question, and I don't know the answer to this, but it's like, do you think, if you ask somebody, will we be wearing jeans 1,000 years from now? Most people would kind of go, I don't think so. We'll probably come up with something new. But if you break it down being like, will we wear jeans 100 years from now? not all of us, but like, will they still be
Yes.
at least 30% of pants?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
And then if they make it that long, which will clearly have way more advanced fiber technology. I mean, look at how fast our sort of textiles have gone in the last 100 years.
Why wouldn't they make it 1,000?
Why wouldn't they make it another 100? And then it's like, well, fuck. We can't break up with jeans.
Invest in fucking jeans.
So it's that's how I tend to think about like self-driving cars and all this kind of stuff. Is we'll see it in like it'll definitely be a part of society, but a lot of times we were wrong about how completely and dominantly it takes over. Yeah. And even with like the internet, and back to that sort of point about the internet has disrupted things. Yeah. We've been seeing that with like television, as we know it, cable television is declining. But what's happened in the pandemic is like, it's not like it goes away and it dies. Yeah. It just sort of merges and becomes this mesh of like stuff, right? So like, what is HBO Max now? Yeah. Like, it's a TV channel that's still on some cable packages. Yeah. It's also this like Netflix alternative with really good content. Yeah. It's also a publishing house of like really well-made shows. It's a bunch of things, and it's in this awkward point of like coming together.
This is what it is. It's Chinese immigrants come to America. They open up a Chinese restaurant. Americans try the food. They're like, this is too Chinese. Right? Like, what the fuck is going on here? So then you have HBO Max, where it's like, okay, some of this is still on regular paid cable. This is also streaming. So now you have like the Chinese food that's somewhat reflective of the Chinese culture, but also somewhat reflective of the American one. Right. And YouTube or Instagram or whatever these things are is basically the Chinese American food, where if a Chinese person tried it, they'd be like, I don't know what the fuck this is.
Or pizza. Yeah. Pizza's not Italian anymore. It's American.
It is.
Yeah, you're
it's
welcome.
Absolutely American. So we're watching the evolution. Sometimes it happens a little bit faster. Sometimes it happens a little slower. Maybe Elon is an amazing marketer, and that's why we all think that electric cars are going to be a thing. I wonder what happens when these other car companies get involved. I don't know if it was you I was talking to, but it was somebody that said the competitive advantage that Tesla has is not necessarily the tech, because he's made the tech open source so everybody can use the tech, but the data. In order to was it you I was talking to about this?
A little bit, yeah. So I think there's a few advantages that Tesla has. I think the most important one now is access to cheaper capital. So let's say...
wait, real quick, before we get into the money thing, this is an AI thing. I don't know if it was you who was talking to or somebody, but they basically said like Tesla, every person that drives a Tesla is feeding information back into that AI. And that AI is that computer learning is happening and is better navigating the streets. So all these new electric cars that pop up aren't going to have as good self-driving because they don't have 20 years or 10 years. How long has Tesla been around now?
Yeah, about 10
years. So they don't have 10 years of people driving. So Volkswagen's going to have its first, self-driving car. You have 1 year of data. Good luck. Right. You might bump into some shit.
So what Tesla's well situated is to have an advantage, along with companies like Google too, because Google's been doing a lot of stuff in this space.
Yeah.
So I think I've recently become more involved with AI startups. So I'm now on the advisory board for 2 different AI companies. Yeah. And what I've learned, and I am by no means an expert in this technology, I'm just trying to get my head around it and being going to be part of sort of the public face of helping them with some initiatives. But what's interesting is it's not that like you create this brain and that's the genius. It's not like the mad scientist, I created this Frankenstein computer brain that's really smart.
It's trial and error.
What you're figuring out is the most efficient way to create software that can learn through machine learning. Yeah. So it's creating the simplest thing that benefits over time with more data being added to it. Is how do we grow intelligence more than how do we create intelligence? Yeah. It's really finding what's the efficient path with the least amount of undesirable outcomes to slowly grow as we add more data input into this device or piece of software.
So in order for Volkswagen or Porsche or one of these companies to have an efficient AI self-driving system, they need that data. And if they haven't been put through all these different situations that Tesla cars have over the last 10 years, they're not going to be as efficient in making the decision that needs to be made to save your life just yet, right? Right. So maybe that's the huge advantage. And maybe that's why when all these other cars pop up onto the market, you're going to notice an even bigger bump for Tesla, because once you try the VW, you're like, dude, I don't even trust it.
All right. But think about it this way.
No, I won't.
It's an advantage, But you know what else is an advantage? Owning Waze. Who owns Waze? Google. Who owns all the mapping things? And that's why like Apple and Google are always arguing about like whose map is default on your phone. So Apple has their own mapping thing, which is getting information about people's driving past. So it's like if you have your iPhone and you're using your Apple Map app to like give yourself directions as you drive your very nice G-Wagon, congrats, rentals, but whatever.
Thank you very much. Shout out to 60. Appreciate you, fam. G-Wagon, not the AMG, but it's all good.
They're getting data about where you're finding traffic in Miami. They're getting data on your routes to and from your sort of very short commute. So they're getting information too. It's not as pure. Tesla's probably getting more per user, but there's way more users. There's way more iPhones in existence that are getting used for traffic navigation than there are Tesla cars.
Yeah.
And then when you look at like what Google has with Google Maps and Waze, they're getting a bunch of stuff as well. So that's kind of like the sort of informational war. And no one has like a clean, singular advantage, but they're all trying to do it in kind of different ways. And that's what's sort of fun to watch is what's going to be more valuable in the end? I have no idea. Is it going to be having the complete data set from actually owning the data coming out of the car itself? Or is the mix of seeing how you behave in New York versus Miami when you're using public transportation mixed in with vehicular transportation, that might end up proving more advantageous.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of AI is you have a system that can crunch all this data.
And keep surfacing discoveries, right?
Yeah.